Thank you very much, Angela, for inviting me to this conference. Yes, today I'm going to be talking about Porphyry astrology as the personal daimon. This is a subject rather dear to my heart because it forms part of my PhD research, which, believe it or not, I still actually love. And so I want to talk today about the personal daimon in the writings of the early Neoplatonic philosopher Porphyry. And because in addition to being a prolific philosopher who put Plotinus's Enneads in the shape that we know today, Porphyry was also a practicing astrologer. My study of his astrological writings in conjunction with his philosophical works, which mention Daimones, have led me to the theory that for Porphyry, parts of astrological practice became a way for him to practice his own personal theurgy. This was in fact rather different from the way that Iamblichus practiced theurgy. And Iamblichus's theurgy was sort of the winners writing the narrative. It's much better known than Porphyry's. So I hope that by the end of this talk you will have a fuller understanding of what Porphyry did in his idiosyncratic combination of astrology, his quest for a personal daimon, and his practice of Neoplatonic ideals in theurgic ritual. Porphyry was born into a wealthy family at Tyre in Phoenicia in about 234 CE. After studying in Athens, he went to Rome to join the school of Plotinus. In addition to his work on the Enneads, he also wrote a life of Plotinus. His works comprise an impressive number of topics, from theurgy and the philosophy of Plato and Aristotle to vegetarianism, Daimones, and astrology. He was the teacher of Iamblichus, whose De Mysteriis was an answer to and critique of Porphyry's letter to a neighbor. Porphyry lived at least to the age of 68 and probably died in around 305 CE. Daimones are an important consideration in Neoplatonism. In addition to interest in a personal daimon, the Neoplatonists also acknowledge and try to deal with both good and bad daimones. Iamblichus insists that only a good daimon can be one's personal daimon, but Neoplatonists also recognize that bad daimones exist in the world and cause misery. Astrology is discussed by several Neoplatonists, including Plotinus, Porphyry, and Iamblichus, and in Porphyry especially, these discussions also involve the personal daimon. Neoplatonism develops a hierarchy of daimones, angelic beings, and gods. This is particularly evident in Plotinus and Iamblichus, but Porphyry also inquires about the hierarchy and definitions of various classes of divine beings. Astrology is sometimes incorporated into the Neoplatonic system and accepted especially by Porphyry and Proclus, while reservations are expressed by Plotinus and Iamblichus. With regard to the daimon and astrology, Porphyry seems most interested in reconciling concepts of daimon with astrological practice, including techniques for finding a representative personal daimon in the birth chart. But let us begin with Plotinus and his thoughts about daimones and astrology. Porphyry was the student of Plotinus, and Iamblichus in turn was taught by Porphyry, even though they differed philosophically in many respects. This lineage has a bearing on the integration of the daimon into the astrological practice of Neoplatonists. In his life of Plotinus, Porphyry relates how the personal daimon of Plotinus was discovered to be not a mere daimon, but a god. An Egyptian who had come to Rome offered to invoke Plotinus's personal daimon, his oikeos daimon, but a god appeared instead. This event was supposedly the impetus for Plotinus's discussion of the personal daimon in Ennead 3:4. Plotinus views astrology as something that can be semiotic, but not necessarily causal. If some astral connection and responsibility in human lives is admitted, as in Plato's myth of this provides a reason for astrology, and astrology must be partly bound up in fate and providence. Plotinus follows the basic idea of the myth of Souls come to earth choosing their lives, but affected by the planetary circumstances in which they are born. Plotinus says that the universe is a mixture of God and daimon, and the passions, ta pathe, are the daimonic part. He says, and so the all is a god when that highest divine soul is counted in with it, but the rest he, being Plato, says is a great daimon, and the passions in it are daimonic. Plotinus draws on portions of Plato's Republic, mentioning the spindle, the planets and stars, and the moirai, and the Timaeus, saying that the planets' relationships to the passions, quote, bind us to the stars from which we get our souls. From these come our characters and the actions resulting from them. When he says about the soul approaching its coming into birth, that something comes to it, hikain ti, something that is subject to passions, what could he mean? Peter Adamson suggests that, quote, the soul acquires its passive part as it descends. In Porphyry's essay on what is up to us, he speaks of the 7 spheres the souls pass through, each inciting it with different desires. Macrobius describes well the different attributes akin to passions that the soul acquires from each of the planets as it descends. Since Plotinus has just mentioned the great daimon and that the passions in the universe are daimonic, could the something that comes to the soul also be its allotted daimon, who, being subject to passions itself, but at a higher level than the soul, can help the incarnated soul strive to control them? The connection between daimones and passions is well known. Being subject to passions is a condition of being human. The daimons, nevertheless, are both the bearer of passions and the guides toward the attainment of virtue. When the soul incarnates, it brings its daimonic guide with it, as the myth of Ur says. We see the lineage of the idea of a personal daimon accompanying the soul into generation, deriving from Plato and moving from Plotinus through Porphyry to Yoeli-Tlalim. Natal astrology becomes part of this system, since it is already predicated on the moment of birth and tries to find the moment of conception, that is, the moment of incarnation. Astrology is logically associated with a system like Plato's that ties fate and the daimon into incarnation. This doesn't really have anything to do with what I'm talking about, but it's an image from an ancient text called the Tabula Cavetus, and the central figure here is the daimon leading the souls into generation. In Plotinus's early treatise on the personal daimon, Ennead 3:4, he has the goal of reconciling the various treatments of the daimon in Plato, in his dialogues Republic, Timaeus, Phaedrus, Phaedo, and Theaetetus. Plotinus sees the personal daimon as a guiding spirit who is hierarchically above the level at which human life is lived, serving as both guide and as aspiration. Furthermore, he connects this guiding daimon with the stars and planets, following the idea of the Timaeus that each soul has its own star. The soul is drawn to, quote, the star which is in harmony with the character and power which lived and worked in them, and each will have a god of this kind as its daimon. This may be where Porphyry got the idea of a ruling planet in the chart as representative of the personal daimon. The soul has been placed in a particular configuration and circuit of heaven, peripherum, the paths of the planets revolving around the spindle in the myth of Ur, and is buffeted by the winds of that heavenly circuit. It's not much of a stretch to envision this beginning with the configuration of planets in the heavens at the time of birth. The role they're given in life is analogous to the astrological configuration at birth, but how we play it depends on us. Moreover, Plotinus says twice in this treatise that we are each, quote, an intelligible cosmos, connecting upper and lower worlds by means of the soul. Since the planets are seen as representatives of divine intelligence, again, it is not a stretch to consider that the astrological chart shows the placement of these divine intelligences in our own personal universe. Plotinus has specifically mentioned the spindle, the fates, and the circuit of heaven. He accepts the idea of souls wedded to the gods of the heavens. God gives human soul, but the, quote, gods born through the heavens, i.e. the planets, give them passions. But we also have our chosen daimon and the ability to control our passions, our reactions to events. The human capability of choosing how to react, either yielding to passion or controlling it, has something to do with the guardian daimon and its encouragement toward a higher and more virtuous life. Daimons, as usual, lie in the middle. They're paradoxically subject to passions, but they are also, according to Plotinus, on a higher and more virtuous plane so that they can guide us. These kinds of ideas may have led Porphyry to develop his idea of the guiding daimon, represented by a ruling planet called the oikodespotes, the housemaster, or one called the Lord of the Geniture, as laid out in his letter to Anebo. The methods for finding such a ruling star, from which length of life can be determined, but character as well, are given in his introduction to the Tetrabiblos, which I'll discuss a little later. The daimon's importance to Neoplatonists is summed up by Proclus, who was influenced by Porphyry and Plotinus in this paean. The daimon alone moves all, governs all, orders all our affairs, for it perfects the reason, moderates passions, inspires nature, maintains the body, provides the accidentals, fulfills the decrees of fate, and bestows gifts from providence. And this one being is king of all that is in us and all that has to do with us, steering our whole life. Well, statements like this demonstrate why finding one's personal daimon was so important. We now turn to Iamblichus on daimonics and astrology. His development of theurgy as a way to be one with God is a counterpoint to Porphyry, both in his understanding of the daimonic and the divine, and in his use of astrology as a practicing Neoplatonist. Iamblichus' treatise on theurgy, De Mysteriis, is largely shaped through a dialogue with Porphyry. The treatise is set up as answers to questions Porphyry posed in his letter to Anebo, which include the place of the daimones in the cosmos and the role of astrology. Naturally, the dialogue is prejudiced in favor of Iamblichus, not Porphyry. The fragments of the letter to Anebo are taken mostly from De Mysteriis, so I'm getting Iamblichus' slant on this. Porphyry asks Anebo, who I think is a substitute for Iamblichus, about predicting the future. Divination can be attained through dreams, divine inspiration, possession, visions, and magical incantations. There's also a technical side to divination, and this is where astrology comes in as a, quote, technique for pursuing the future through stars, end quote. Porphyry wants to know who provides information about the future. Is it gods, angels, daimones, or something else? Iamblichus does not deny that divine beings come in various guises and exist at different levels, but they are not to be used to see the future willy-nilly, but to help the human soul advance on the path of becoming more divine. The preferred method for this is through theurgy. In fact, he claims that the gods can deliberately not tell the future when it is in the interest of the human soul's virtue. Quote, whenever it is necessary for the soul to exercise virtue, and uncertainty of the future contributes to this, the gods conceal the things that will happen in order to make the soul better. End quote. So the goal is not to see the future, but to become more godlike. One wonders if the influence of the personal daimon also comes into play, urging the incarnated soul toward the path of virtue, as Plotinus might say. Regarding astrological practices related to the personal daimon, Iamblichus is wary. Porphyry wants to know what Anebo thinks of the notion that the planet, which is the astrological housemaster of the nativity, the oikodespotes tes geneseos, imparts the personal daimon. The daimon is the spirit of that planetary god. Iamblichus replies by explaining that there are two ways to approach the discovery of the personal daimon. One is theurgic and one technical, i.e. astrological. To put the matter simply, one may take two approaches to the personal daimon. The one theurgic, the other technical. Following the former procedure, one summons the daimon down from the higher causal principles, while, according to the latter, from the visible cycles in the nativity. The former makes no use of natal astrology, while the latter makes use also of such procedures. The former operates on a more universal basis, transcending the realm of nature, while the latter conducts its worship on a particular level, following the dictates of nature. All this being the case, you seem to me to be proceeding inappropriately in dragging down the more perfect type of worship to the merely human level and exercising your prowess in raising difficulties on that. Well, naturally, Iamblichus is more interested and finds more effective the theurgic practice. Porphyry's slant, stemming from his interest in astrology, is different. Iamblichus does not dismiss astrology entirely, although he obviously considers it inferior to pure theurgy. But for him, theurgy transcends nature, while astrology must operate within nature. When Porphyry emphasizes the oikodespotes as the personal daimon, Iamblichus is quick to point out that it is not quite that simple. You seem to me to be cutting off just a small portion of the whole question concerning the daimon. For whereas those experts who operate within the bounds of nature are accustomed to give it its designation in due order on the basis of the decans and the servitors, the zodiacal signs and the stars, the sun and the moon, from the greater and lesser bear, from all the elements in cosmos as a whole, you are making the error of detaching one small part of this, that of the master of the house, and have concentrated all your inquiries on that. Well, Iamblichus' point is that one cannot find the personal daimon by using just one astrological technique, or even the astrological chart as a whole, but must take every part of the entire cosmos into account, presumably by methods in addition to astrology. His remark about the personal daimon makes this clear. If I am to reveal to you the truth about the personal daimon, it is not from one part only of the heavenly regions, nor from any one element of the visible realm, that this entity is imparted to us, but from the whole cosmos, and from the whole variety of life within it, and from every sort of body. He then continues, for the personal daimon does not guide just one or another part of our being, but all of them at once, and it extends to the whole administration of us, even if as it has been allotted to us from all the regions of the universe. And indeed the evidence that you adduce concerning daimonics presiding over various parts of the body which attend to their health and condition, and then a single overseer established over all in common, this you may take as an indication of the supervisory role granted to a single daimon over everything that concerns us. Do not therefore make a distinction between one daimon concerned with the body, another with the soul, another with the intellect. So here, Iamblichus seems to say that the oikodespotes is a daimon. He also warns Porphyry against seeing the personal daimon as anything less than an overall ruler, and implies that astrology ignores a single overseer in favor of lesser oikodespoti. But Porphyry's position as an astrologer is that astrological analogues of the personal daimon can be found in the chart, and they are overall chart rulers. Astrology has an abiding interest in finding administrators who oversee the chart, along with an interest in daimones and where they fit into the astrological scheme. Iamblichus also evidently has some knowledge of the techniques used to find a housemaster, since he reminds Porphyry of the clear methods for its discovery. When in doubtful cases, they, meaning the Chaldeans and the Egyptians, set out for their elucidation, in some cases 5 elements, in others even more than that, while in others less. These 5 elements he's talking about must refer to the steps used by astrologers to find an oikodespotes, as Ptolemy does. And furthermore, Iamblichus uses the word epikrateia in relation to the daimon. This is predomination, and there's an astrological technique called predomination involved in the discovery of the oikodespotes, as we'll see. Okay, I'm going to turn now to Porphyry and his astrological treatise, but before I do that, I just want to quickly show you some sort of basic ways in which daimon in ancient astrology appears in very basic astrological techniques. And the first is in the system of what are now called houses, which the ancients called places, divisions of the chart representing different areas of life. And you can see that I've highlighted the house of the good daimon, the Agathos daimon, and the house of good fortune, Aithe. Daimon and fortune in late antique culture, Greco-Roman and late antique culture, are often spoken about together, as if they're opposite sides of the same coin. And the same thing happens in astrology. You've got the daimon, good daimon, opposite good fortune, and then of course you have evil daimon, opposite bad fortune. So you've got quite a good chunk of the chart involving daimon or variations on daimon. And the other prominent use of daimon in ancient astrology is in something called lots. A lot is takes the arc between 2 points in the chart, in this case for the lot of fortune and daimon, the arc between the sun and the moon, and projects it from the ascendant, which is the point of the zodiac sign passing over the eastern horizon. And so this arc is projected in one direction for the lot of fortune, and then in the other direction for the lot of Daimon, so they become mirror images of each other. I'm not going to get into the calculation of these, but this is just to give you an idea. And these two lots were considered to be the most important lots in antiquity. Okay, so let's talk about Porphyry's astrological treatise. He has several works dealing with both Daimones and astrology. These include the letter to a Nebo on what is up to us, philosophy from oracles, the cave of the nymphs in the Odyssey. Another treatise on abstinence deals in part with Daimones of all kinds, and he is the presumed author of most chapters of the astrological treatise, the Introduction to the Tetrabiblos. We may thus consider him knowledgeable, even expert, in both these fields, Daimones and astrology. Although some scholars have questioned whether Porphyry is the author of the Introduction to the Tetrabiblos, I am reasonably confident of his authorship, except for the last chapters, which have been shown as late additions to the text. Certainly, Porphyry lifted large portions of his text from the earlier astrologer Antiochus of Athens, but this should not invalidate his authorship in general. Marilyn Lawrence has plausibly suggested that the introduction may even have been a response to Plotinus's statements on astrology, especially those in Book 2-3 of the Enneads. I add that Porphyry may not have only been writing in response to Plotinus, fulfilling a debt to his teacher at long last, but also with his extensive discussion of the oikodespotes in chapter 30, specifically rebutting Iamblichus's criticisms. There is some additional circumstantial evidence for Porphyry's authorship. He did not just lift Antiochus without commentary. Chapter 30, which is the chapter on finding a lord of the geniture, contains illuminating comments. Given Porphyry's interest in finding the astrological personal daimon by the technique of the oikodespotes, these comments stress its significance and provide another indication that the work is his, sandwiched as they are between the words of Antiochus. Arguably, the most important astrological issue for Porphyry is how to find the personal daimon in the birth chart. We have seen Iamblichus's response to Porphyry's questions about the personal daimon. We have not, however, looked at this issue from Porphyry's standpoint. From his statements in the essay on What is Up to Us, Porphyry's interest in applying Plato's concept of the personal daimon from the myth of Ur to the astrological chart is plain. He believes each incarnated soul enters the chosen life with her daimon ratifying the chosen life at the appropriate astrological moment. Porphyry is convinced of a connection between the personal daimon and the analog of that daimon which can be found in the birth chart. For him, this analog is found by determining the predominator and the oikodespotes, geneseos, the housemaster of the nativity, and from that, the lord of the nativity. We shall now examine Porphyry's treatment of the predominator, the housemaster, and the lord, what he means by oikodespotes, and how these may relate to the discovery of an astrological personal daimon. The first section of his chapter on this topic is clearly borrowed from the summary of Antiochus's introduction. Here we see Porphyry's text, and I've put the deviations from Antiochus in italics. So he says, furthermore, precise definitions are required to differentiate housemaster of the nativity, lord, and predominator from one another. For the ancients entangle the names up and do not distinguish their characteristics. For each has its own power, just like a skipper and a pilot, so we will teach how they are different from each other. Along with Antiochus's words, Porphyry has inserted his own comments in the red italics there. Porphyry insists on precise definitions for the three kinds of rulers and clarifications of earlier texts. And to me, it seems as if he's actually creating his own doctrine, his own technique here when he says we have to distinguish these three from each other, which the ancients did not, because he's trying to create his own system. This first part continues by explaining how to determine the predominator, the epicratator of the chart. You start with the sun or the moon. but the ascendant can also become the predominator if the luminaries are not well positioned in the chart. Porphyry says, for generally the luminary that is more on an angle and more in the east and of the sect determines the predominator. So it's important for the predominator to come from this side of the chart to relate to the ascendant or to the sun and moon if they're well placed. The reason that, then he says if both luminaries are declining, then the ascendant will obtain predomination. The reason that Porphyry, following Antiochus, is interested in finding the predominator is because you determine the oikodespotes from it. And from the oikodespotes you find the overall lord of the nativity. Porphyry gives both his own way of finding the overall lord, the kurios of the chart, and the opinion of others on how to find it. He says the process is intricate and difficult. Quote, for the search for this is long and perhaps more difficult than all others. He looks at a number of house masters who could be considered for the job of an overall chart ruler. And they are the lords of particular places in the chart. The midheaven, which is up here, the ascendant, the planet in this first place. And after giving the candidates, he says that to choose the overall lord of the chart, find, quote, the one placed most sympathetically in the nativity. That is the one situated better, more in a phase of visibility, more on its own places and having the most power in relation to the configuration of the nativity and those co-witnessing it. This process makes it clear that Porphyry, contrary to what Iamblichus has said about him, flitting between one daimon, i.e. oikodespotes for this, and another daimon for that, is ultimately interested in a single lord of the nativity, thus representing the astrological personal daimon. At each step, Porphyry looks for the planet in the best condition in the chart, the one most able to give benefits. Each succeeding ruler builds on the strength of the one before it. Each time a planet is seen to have difficulty, if it's cadent, if it's setting in the west, if it's in a phase of invisibility with the sun, if it's not in the same sect as the chart, it's discarded in favor of a stronger planet. The finding of these three rulers helps coordinate the selection of an overall ruler of the chart. One planet may be both housemaster and lord, and in that case, Porphyry says it will then rule over a great outcome. Porphyry's methods are, in fact, similar to those of most astrologers in the Greco-Roman and late antique periods. These methods use the positions of the sun, moon, or ascendant in some way. The concept of an oikodespotes determined from a predominator is covered by Dorotheus of Sidon and Vettius Valens. Some of the procedures he describes are similar to those attributed to Dorotheus by Hephaestio, though they're each finding different kinds of rulers. Porphyry relies on good or operative places for his determinations. Paul of Alexandria and his commentator Olympiodorus ultimately want to find a planet with the most authority, similar to Porphyry's kurios, or lord. While the interests of the other astrologers are mostly in determining length of life, Porphyry does not mention length of life in this chapter. In fact, his interest seems to be ultimately in finding an authentic or authoritative authenticon planet which rules over the whole life, which rules over those who've been born, whatever its length. So what, for Porphyry, is the ultimate relationship among the predominator, the housemaster, and the lord? All three are involved in finding an overall ruler for the chart, a planet that connects all the important parts of the chart together. The luminaries, the ascendant, the aspects between these places and planets, the important places of the chart, like the ascendant, the midheaven, the place of the good daimon, the lot of fortune, planets and phases of visibility. The planet with strong position, good phase, connection with luminaries, and relationships with important places in the chart becomes able to coordinate the whole work and purpose of the chart. So here in astrological language is the work of the personal daimon made manifest. The planet which represents the personal daimon becomes a way for the astrologer to do a kind of astrological theurgy, either for himself or for his client, a ritual involving stars, mathematics, harmony, sympatheia, and light. He's not just finding a strong and well-endowed planet, but a planet which becomes the astrological analog of the personal daimon. Again, that planet cannot be one in a weak position. This is not a technique which comes up with a feeble daimon, but one which can spur the holder of such chart onto his or her highest potential. So I'd like to finish by talking a little bit about how Porphyry might see this procedure in relation to theurgy. In discussing the higher and lower theurgy of Iamblichus, Andrew Smith suggests that lower theurgy has to do with sympatheia and the material world, which includes daimones. There's also a distinction between religious theurgy, higher theurgy, and philosophic and practical theurgy, lower theurgy. Recall Iamblichus's remark about the two ways to find the personal daimon, one theurgic and one technical, i.e. astrological. Smith calls these two kinds of theurgy different on the ontological level at which each operates, based on the inner disposition of the human participant himself. In the Cave of the Nymphs, Porphyry mentions propitiating one's personal daimon as a good thing to do, using the example of Odysseus. He says, hence his sitting under the olive tree befits him, since he is the god's suppliant and appeases the natal daimon under the olive branch. So this would be an example of lower theurgy. It's doubtful that Porphyry would have considered the astrological discovery of the personal daimon an example of a higher theurgy, assuming he even accepted something like a lower and a higher theurgy. But it would have been a way of increasing knowledge which would lead to becoming more virtuous. Knowing about one's personal daimon in whatever ways are available, including astrological, could only improve one's ability to understand the plan of the life the soul has chosen and aid in the achievement of virtue. There may even be, in finding the astrological daimon, a way to free oneself from part of fate by propitiating the right gods in the right way. In the letter to Anebo, Porphyry connects fate, Hemarmene, to the stars, but these stars represent gods who can deliver one from it. And most of them even made what is up to us dependent on the motion of the stars, binding them fast, I do not know how, by the indissoluble bonds of necessity which they call fate, and making all things dependent on the gods whom, as the only deliverers from fate, they worship with temples and statues and the like. More importantly, the personal daimon has a role to play in the release from Hemarmene. He is surely happy, Oidaimon, who, learning the celestial configuration of his own birth, and hence recognizing his personal daimon, is enabled to neutralize by sacrifices the power of fate. By knowing his own astrological configurations, then, Porphyry thinks he will be better able to free himself from the material bonds of Hemarmene and to construct his theurgic rituals accordingly. In this way, Porphyry, by taking on the long and difficult task of finding the true, strongest, and best planet in the chart, is actually beginning his own theurgy with astrology. For him, this task becomes a religious endeavor every bit as sacred and elevating as the theurgical rites that Iamblichus finds so inspiring. Thank you.